We're here to talk about the differences between predestination and determinism, and whether or not the Assemblies of God should adopt them, right?
Hooray!
A little heavy for the 9 o'clock, so we'll keep it easy. But if I haven't met you yet, I'm Cory. I serve as the campus pastor for Evangel up in Garrison, but I was for 5 years the youth pastor here in Bismarck. And so coming from this background of a very large youth ministry to now a town of 1,200 people and a church of 120, I've seen both ends of the spectrum. And so to be able to talk to this subject of youth in rural communities and how we can reach them better than how we have, it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. But I'm pretty unfiltered. If you sat in my class yesterday on what it's like to be a former alcoholic, then you know I say things that probably most pastors don't say in church. But I didn't get saved till I was 21, so I have a history. We all have a past and have a background. And I just do things very differently. Last night we were singing the song, Pastor Destiny gets on stage and she's like, hey, let's just sing a cappella. And she says a couple words and everybody chimes in. I'm like, I don't know the words to this song. Like, I'm a late bloomer when it comes to Christianity. So I'm just sitting there like, Jesus, this is great. Listening to everybody. So I'm one of those guys. But being on both sides of youth ministry, I've learned this quote. And write it down. And if you want my notes, I'll email them to you, whatever you want. I'm an open book. But a smaller youth ministry has the flexibility and qualities to be flexible and relational. Two qualities that are really hard in a large youth ministry. And these will serve... Huh? I'll repeat it. A smaller youth ministry has the flexibility and qualities to be flexible and relational. Two things you cannot get in a larger youth groups. I related to John Mark Comer's book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, when he talked about running full speed in a mega church and then wanting to leave all of that because you just get burned out from it and then start doing a smaller church. I'm like, that was my life. I did it for 5 years, hit a wall, felt God speaking to me to do something else, and so I just quit ministry. I didn't know what else to do. I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do. A year later, we started our Garrison campus after that, but it's just not sustainable to run with flashy lights and all hype every Wednesday, 2 services. It's just you run yourself into the ground. So I will take a smaller youth ministry and the flexibility and qualities that come with it over a large ministry. I'll also say you really do need a heart for teenagers. They genuinely can tell if you like them or not. I coach baseball and you can just tell what coaches the kids like and what coaches they don't like. And you have to have a heart for them. And I'm not saying you gotta be their best friend, but you have to have a heart to be involved in their life. You can teach how to do ministry, but you can't teach heart. So you might be here taking notes, and your first step is to go find a youth leader that likes students. Doesn't mean you don't like them, but having a heart for them is totally different. And on that same line, if you have kids in the house still, it's hard to be an involved youth pastor, a youth leader, because you have kids of your own. I've got a 9-year-old, and she was born when I stepped into full-time ministry, and for the first 5 years of her life, she just does not remember me being home. Because I took over the largest youth ministry in North Dakota, and I just was running full speed, lived at church. I remember sleeping on my couch here at the office because I was trying to go for my licensing and run the youth ministry at the same time. It was just the crazy things that took place. But if you've got a family, it's really hard to be at every baseball game, to be at every basketball game, to be at every choir concert, to do everything. But in rural communities, as a youth leader, you need to be present in the kids' life, in the students' lives. And so you have to have a heart. So your step might be finding someone in your church that has a heart for teenagers. You can still be the youth pastor, still be a leader, but get someone in your team that has a heart that can be there for those kids. Even if they're young in their faith, you can disciple them. I had lots of youth leaders in Garrison that young in their faith, but they're ones, they don't have kids. They can show up to the baseball games. They can travel. They can do things. So it's great. But the hardest part of youth ministry is youth want your attention, and your family does too. So don't kill yourself trying to reach the kids in your community, trying to reach the youth in your community. Don't gain the whole world and lose your soul, right? That we apply that to many things in the worldly aspect, but it applies to ministry as well. Don't gain the whole world of ministry and getting all the kids in your town into your youth group, and then you just lose your soul. You lose your family through all of that. We've heard so many pastors that lose their families because they devoted their life to the church. God didn't call you to sacrifice your life for the church. Right? He says, give up your worldly things and serve the body of Christ. Serve Him. And I've been doing this long enough to know I'll take 20 students over 300 students any day. 20 students is so much better than the hype. You will have a greater impact with 5 than you will 500. It's just fact. Stop looking at the attendance and start looking at the impact. And when you start reaching the 5, those 5 can go reach more. Those 5 will go reach the 500. I read this in an article a couple weeks ago. Rural communities are often overlooked in discussions about ministry strategy and resources. One thing youth workers in rural communities have known for quite some time is that many published youth ministry materials often don't work in rural context. Rural youth workers don't have access to resources, funding from the church organization that more prominent churches often do, and yet most communities in America are large or suburban. However, youth ministry can flourish in rural settings. In fact, a thriving youth ministry can make a cultural impact in a small town, and most youth workers in America are volunteers who come from small town settings. So there's 2 aspects of it: training leaders because they're the next generation of the church, but then there's also the youth in America that you have a greater reach to because of just the ability to be present in their life. I, as a youth pastor down here, I never had the opportunity to go to the baseball games. There was 5 high schools, 20 middle schools, 300 kids. How am I going to make it to all these games? I tried to create a calendar for everything, get all the different leaders that lived in different areas to the right schools and the right games at the right time. I was like, that was more than a full-time job just doing that. Like, how am I going to manage this? So then I get on the other side of it, and I'm like, I can be at every baseball game. I take my daughter with me, take our family with me. I have a youth pastor now in the last 2 years, and he's a young single guy, he goes to the games. I coach baseball, like I said. He came to one of our games the other night because half the baseball team comes to our youth group now. And so, like, just being present there in those moments. And when I say rural, I mean rural. Town of 1,200. We talked yesterday, and it was like, Dustin goes, Watford's not rural anymore. I'm like, no, you're 10,000 people? Roughly? Yeah, it's not rural anymore. And so rural communities, towns of less than 2,000 people. But the American church, so put aside all the flash sheet and everything. Green, the grass is not green on the other side. But what's interesting is the American church wants to travel to Africa, take pictures, post it on Instagram, and we're scared to feed the teenagers in our own backyard. Like we're terrified of teenagers. We were all there. We remember being a teenager at times, right? But I don't think we know what to do because the statistic that we talk about all the time in church, and we've all heard it, is that 70% of youth leave the church after they graduate. That's a scary statistic. But what's so interesting is I was reading this article on churchleaders.com that they shared this statistic. The very next statistic was that half come back after a decade. Half come back to church after a decade. And I got so frustrated reading this article because it goes on to say, the American evangelical church has lost and is losing and will almost certainly continue to lose youth. And I got so frustrated reading the article because I'm thinking, half come back. Okay, half come back. Half the kids come back to church. That's a huge win in my book. That's seeds being planted. Pastor Destiny talked about this last night. She talked about a quarter, right? As they're throwing seeds in the parable of the sower, a quarter of the seeds take root and grow and flourish in their faith. And I'm going, we've got half in youth ministry. We're doing great, according to this statistic. Right? Half come back to church. Youth ministry is all about planting seeds that you might never harvest. You are planting seeds, which is frustrating because as pastors and as leaders, we want to grab the kids and we want to mold them. Here's how you read your Bible, and we want to see them just flourish in that aspect so they don't leave the church after high school. And I'm like, if we can just show them the love of Christ and what it looks like, model being a good Christian, then that is a seed they're going to take into their life. And yeah, they're probably going to walk away from the church. Yeah, they're probably going to struggle with alcohol and drugs and go to college and make bad choices. But if half of them are coming back to the church and they have a model of what a Christian looks like from you, then we're way ahead of the game in this. They're going to remember what a Christian looks like, and they're going to come back to it at some point. There's a story of a young man in our church. We started our church in 2019. I started coaching baseball to get involved with the community. He was on our baseball team, and his family's one of the biggest farmers in our area, and he was the influencer. If you got him, you were getting everybody in school to be a part of whatever activity he was a part of. Just a stocky, solid stud baseball player, well-known family. So I went after him. So I'm like, if I get one, I'm going to get the rest of them. So I invited him to youth when we started our youth group. And I'll back up, our superintendent up there said, he approached me 2 months after we started the church, and he said, hey, I don't know what your plans are for youth. I know you're a former youth pastor. We've had 3 suicide attempts in 6 months. What are you going to do about it? I don't know what I'm going to do about it, but hey, we'll do something. Like if you're asking as a superintendent of our schools, we'll do something. And so we started our youth group, and I went after this kid, and he invited all his friends. I took them all out to lunch. Here's my plans. Here's what I want to do. Cool. He didn't go to church. His parents were Catholic. They didn't go to church, though. And he ended up, we went through youth, and he graduated that next fall. And he was a partier. He was a drinker. Came down here to BSC, party. He knew he wanted to go into the family business of farming, but he was just a party animal. And him and all his friends from Garrison. And he ended up coming back 2 years later, so just in the last year and a half or so. And we connected real quick, so he moved back to town. And while he was gone, his parents started coming to church. Mm-hmm. And so they had been kind of continuing to plant the seed in his life. That, hey, we started going to Evangel, and he came a couple times down here and wasn't sure, young. And they started coming to church and flourishing. And I mean, hearing all their friends came to church, and now they're like, we finally get it. He was sitting in my office 6 months ago, the parents of this young man, and they're like, can we have a Bible? We don't have a Bible. And I was like, but didn't you guys go to the Catholic church? Yeah, but we still didn't have a Bible. And I was like, so we got them Bibles, and they're just flourishing in their faith. So this young man comes back, and he starts texting me questions. Hey, my parents are reading the Bible, and I started reading a little bit, and he's texting me questions and all this stuff. And now he's fully involved with church, and he's serving and wants to start serving in youth ministry, and he's thriving in his faith, and he's getting married soon, and his parents are involved. And it's just this amazing story of a seed that we planted in our youth ministry, and it was one of the 50% that came back. And now some of his friends are he still has influence with his friends. And they're asking questions. I'm playing youth pastor again, but I'm a campus pastor. But it's still a heart for people, obviously. And it's this moment of just he went to college, lived the life, and he was the statistic that came back. And I'm like, all right, that's seeds planted. Let's grow these seeds. And I had the benefit of actually seeing the harvest on this one. But youth, understand this. Write it down, whatever you're going to do. Youth will come to your Wednesday night for the fun, but they will stay for the relationship with you and your leaders. Yeah. They'll come for the fun. You gotta have the fun. You can't just not have some of the flashiness. And when I say flashiness, flashiness, I don't mean the stage lights and the smoke and all that stuff, and loud music and parties. I'm saying they will come for the fun, the games. When we started our youth ministry, we simply went down to Senex. There's hardly any restaurants in Garrison. We went down to Senex. They had trio pizzas that were like 4 feet long. We bought those every Wednesday, bought a bunch of soda, and like that was youth. Like, all right, guys, hey, we bought some games like spike ball and table games, and the kids were playing. We had pizza together and just started building a relationship and just building that culture of Wednesday nights coming, being a part, and they were all used to confirmation. They're used to doing that, and we were just like this random thing that came out of nowhere. And what on earth? This is youth ministry. I'm like, we're getting it. We're starting this. We're being attractional to get them in the building. And pizza ended up costing way too much money in the long run, so we just found a bunch of parents in the church and grandparents and that, hey, will you just come dinner? Many of our students come from sports right after. I mean, I coach baseball Wednesday. Practice goes till 5:30, youth starts at 6, so these kids are going straight from practice. They're starving. They're always starving. So, hey, get food. That's a huge attractional part of our youth ministries. We just have food. And so pop, inflation, we won't go there. But you can sum up youth ministry like this. Food, fun, and someone to care. Food, fun, and someone to care. And you're probably thinking, where's the Bible in all of that? It's under someone to care. Try to keep it simple, and we're pastors, so it's 3 points, food, fun, someone to care. But like I said, we started buying pizza. It got expensive. We asked people in church. I got more involved with coaching and in the school. Our youth pastor now, he substitute teaches just to get to know kids, and I'm very flexible with his schedule because I want him to get to know the youth in our community. And so if he gets called in to sub on a Thursday and it's his work day, he just swaps it for Friday. It doesn't bother me at all. He's also my brother-in-law, so I kind of have an advantage that my brother-in-law is our youth pastor and our kids pastor. But what's interesting is 80% of our youth don't come to church, and their parents don't come to church either. It's outreach. Wednesday night is an outreach event. And so we've started to break it up into 2 things because we realized it's really hard to disciple kids on Wednesday night. Their minds are so consumed with the activities they're doing, the school homework they got to get home and do. It's hard to disciple. Do we still present the gospel on Wednesdays? Oh yeah, for sure. And I'll get into some strategy here towards the end. But they started coming ultimately because we started going. They started coming. I realized as a youth pastor down here, we tried to be super attractional, get everybody to come to this big flashy stuff that we're doing. We'll give away beats, we'll give away iPods, we'll give away whatever. Like, come to us, and it just doesn't work that well. I mean, it just doesn't work to have a huge attractional thing. You have to go, your youth leaders have to go to where these kids are. They have to step out of their comfort zone and go to the awkward choir concert where it doesn't sound great, and encourage those students afterwards, like, you did great on that trombone, man. Just bite your tongue a little bit and be like, man, that was terrible. Because band concerts don't sound good to 6th graders. But you have to be there to encourage them. And the hardest part about this is parents aren't there for their kids anymore, so it's falling on the church. It's the same as the school system. The school should not be raising our kids. But that's how culture has gotten. Like, oh, they learn it all in school. They learn it all in school. And now we're seeing it in the church. That parents aren't involved in their kids' lives as much as they should be. For whatever reason. And now it's falling on the church almost to raise their kids. And I don't want to adopt that full principle, like you need to raise the kids. But it's your job as a leader and a pastor to shepherd students and what it looks like to be a Christian. What it looks like to live a life surrendered to God. And I've learned this in the last couple of years. I taught it in another session that I taught yesterday on alcohol. do in moderation, students, our kids, everybody else in our church does in excess. In moderation, I love to fish. I live in Garrison. We're on the lake. Like, I love to fish. The more and more that I talk about it and do it, I'm giving that much more permission to everybody in our church to be like, oh, all the parents that are neglecting their students are out fishing. And I was so convicted of that. Like, as a pastor, the things I do, I'm giving permission to my congregation to do in excess. Am I shepherding my church the best I can by showing them what it looks like to be a Christian? And is there anything wrong with fishing? No. I take my daughter with me. I take my dad with me. I go with people in church. We go fishing. We have great conversations. We have fun with it. But what I'm doing in moderation, everyone's doing in excess. If I'm reading my Bible, if I'm teaching what biblical principles we should be following as a Christian and seeing a transformed life, that's what now my congregation is starting to do. That's what the youth group is starting to do. So we have to be very careful as pastors and leaders what we're doing, because our congregation, our youth ministries, our kids ministries will do them in excess. So, to back up, see how you can get involved. See how you can get involved with the school. I love what Pastor Destiny was talking about last night. How they adopted schools. I looked at my youth pastor sitting next to me. I was like, we got to figure out how to do that. We have 2 schools in our town, the elementary school and the high school. How can we adopt those schools and just be more involved in them with everything we can do? I can't coach forever. I love coaching. I probably won't do it next year because it's just 3 games a week, practice Monday through Friday. Like, I got a 1-year-old at home. I want to be involved with his life, not make the mistake I did with my 9-year-old, serving the church all the time. I was not going to sacrifice my next kid for the church, but because I'm accountable for that to God one day, leading my family. But how can we as a church body adopt the youth in our community? We can do it because we're such a small community. Everybody knows everybody. You can't blow your nose without somebody in town hearing about it and you did it wrong. I mean, it's just the fact we cut down trees in our backyard and everybody in town knew, oh, I was there when they planted those trees 20 years ago. And I was like, well, you shouldn't have planted them so close because they were growing together. You know, like everybody in small towns knows everything. And so it's this moment, it's so true. It's this moment of getting involved in the wise words of Pastor Sheldon. Don't take a position where there's opposition. Don't take a position where there's opposition. Oh, that word stuck with me when he told me that one time. I was like, should I? Pastor Sheldon, I was new. I'm from Seattle, so large area. We moved to Bismarck. I was like, this is the smallest town we ever lived in. Then we moved to Garrison. Way the smallest town we ever lived in. But this moment, I'm talking to Pastor Sheldon, and he just told me that. And so I was like, should I get on city council and just try and get evangelists? He's like, don't take a position where there's opposition. He's like, let your church do that. Let people in your church do that. Encourage them as good Christians to take those positions. He's like, you take all the fun ones. I'm like, oh, we can do that as pastors. We can take fun positions, you know? So that's why I started coaching. I got in the fire department just to get to know parents in that aspect. And it's all volunteer stuff. But I never want to take the position where there's going to be a ton of opposition. And so you and your leaders need to make deposits into students to make withdrawals. You have to make deposits into students to make withdrawals. They're not going to come to your youth ministry unless you first go to their thing, their concert, their games. You're going to get the few that trickle in, right? And we are responsible for the youth that are attending our church. Their parents attend. I want to shepherd our students well, and like I said, we'll get into that with some strategy in a little bit, how we do that aspect of discipleship. But you got to get you and your youth leaders, and you can do it because of the towns you're in. It was so impossible when I was living here in Bismarck to do those kinds of things. I think I made 3 football games the entire time I was a youth pastor because it was so difficult to go to every single person's game. I have no shame, really, in inviting my whole baseball team to our youth nights, youth events, everything that we do, but they don't show up until you show up. Now, to give you some strategy, I'll say this: what works for me won't work for you. What works for me won't work for you. We're all in different communities, different sizes, different places. But what works for me isn't going to work for you. But there is some overall strategy we can do. First things first, as a youth pastor or youth leader, you need to have clear vision of what your lead pastor wants. Probably not what you thought you were going to hear in reaching the youth in rural communities. You need to have clear vision of what your youth pastor wants. Excuse me, your lead pastor wants. If you don't come under their vision, you won't be happy and you will be butting heads with them. So, if you don't know what they want, your next step is to schedule a meeting with your lead pastor, bring them their favorite coffee, and pick their brain on what they want and have vision for as a youth ministry. And look, I'll tell you this is just a secret of the trade. Communicate your intentions. Don't just schedule a meeting with your lead pastor. Because, well, we're all pastors. When somebody schedules a meeting with us and we don't know what's going on, we're twiddling our thumbs for the next 48 hours till we meet with them. Are they leaving the church? Are they frustrated with me? Are they mad at me? And we always default to the worst. You know, half the time they want to come in the office and go, can you talk about this message a little bit more? I mean, I'm just growing in my faith. Like, take a long breath because they're not, not going to jail or something. It's a moment of relief. So communicate your intentions so your lead pastor has time to think about it and has time to process. What do I want in our youth ministry? What do I want from our youth leader? What do I want from our youth pastor? So you have to unpack the vision of your lead pastor. And really it falls under two categories and they can kind of be merged together. Do they want you just to shepherd the students in your church? Just take care of the flock that we have. The students, their parents attend church, they attend church. Hey, just take care of the ones that are here. Or do they want you to get students involved that aren't involved with the church? And I say that because I've experienced it in youth ministry. I've seen pastors get frustrated with their youth pastors because there wasn't clear communication. The youth pastor starts outreaching to getting kids to come to their church, and the pastor goes, what are you doing? You're blowing through money. No, I just want you to shepherd the kids that we have in our church. And I was like, and that's, communication's everything in life, right? That's marriage, that's parenting, that's being a pastor, communicating. We should be really good at this as pastors, but we're not. And so communicate with your pastor the expectation. Do they want you to shepherd the students in your church, or do they want you to get students involved that aren't involved within your church? Every lead pastor is different. You would think all of them would want you to reach all of the students in your community, but I've seen that not to be true. They want you to just focus on the kids in your church. But more than likely, they want you to do both. Yes, shepherd our youth in the church, but also grow the youth ministry. Grow the youth ministry, which as a pastor now, I do not put the pressure on my youth pastor to grow the youth ministry because I know the pressure. I know the pressure as a former youth pastor to get, attendance was down. Oh, attendance was up. Awesome, we're on a high. Oh, attendance is down. Okay, we have a big event, we get high attendance, and then it crashes again. Like the roller coaster of emotions will cause burnout faster than anything. So just be clear. Have conversation. If you're a youth pastor in the room, youth leader in the room, have an open conversation with your youth pastor. If you're a lead pastor in the room, have a conversation with your youth pastor and take the pressure off, because attendance isn't everything. It's just not. And we try to cover it, and I'm probably being very unfiltered right now. We try to cover it as pastors, like, but it's not about attendance, it's about the heart and people getting saved. Yes, that's what it's all about. Jesus says, go and make disciples of all nations. That's what we want. But he never said, go and make sure your attendance is constantly growing in your church. This can give us a heart attack one day. And so don't put the pressure on yourself. I will take 5 students. well discipled, teaching them how to read their Bible, than 500 in a huge outreach event that cost us $5,000. And 90% of the kids aren't coming back anyway. They just came for the free iPad. Unfiltered, like I said. Now, there's attractional and there's discipleship. Attracting those that aren't in your church, but then also discipling those and the students that are in your church. They will come for fun, but they'll stay for relationships. They're going to come for the fun, but if you're not building relationships with them, they're not going to stay for it. Fun, food, someone to care. Now, the way we do it is we created a second thing that Pastor Terry started doing down here when he was the youth pastor. We had Wednesday nights and then we had Sunday nights. Sunday nights was very much a Bible study, teachings, Q&A. We still did food because where there's food, there's students. So we did dinner on Sunday nights, which we don't do that aspect of it now because I don't want to take away from the family dinner table anymore. And dads just aren't home all the time because of jobs. And so I want them to be able to be home for dinner. So we do something later on Sunday nights now at this time. But we do a discipleship-based class, whatever you want to call it. It's just a hangout. Kids come. There's some snacks. They're always hungry. There's snacks. We have a fun time together, play a game. But then it's just really opening the Bible, talking through different things, and answering questions. We'll do different aspects of it. We'll do just hangout, like a movie night on a Sunday night in summer, just to keep building relationships with them. But we'll also do Q&A. I'll come in once in a while with our youth pastor and just answer questions. We'll invite parents to come be a part of it and just see what we're all about, because 80% of our kids aren't in the youth or in the church, so I want parents to come and see what we're actually talking about. So we try and have this very open relationship with families. But Wednesday nights is very outreach, small discipleship. Sunday nights is very much just discipleship. So that's our structure and how we do things up there. But everything we do really has a reason behind it. It's Simon Sinek's book, starts with why. You got to have a why for the reason you're doing something. If you can't justify why you're doing something, you're probably just spending energy on things you shouldn't be spending energy on, and you can do it on something else. We have a small building. It seats about 120 in our auditorium, and we have to flip this room every week for youth. This is our building. We have chairs for church, and then right after church, we tear everything down and we set up tables just like this for youth, and we put games on them. That's a lot of work. Again, we spend time flipping the entire room every single week. Then Thursday mornings, we go in. I call Pastor Dustin, because that's our one-on-ones every Thursday morning, and he hears me and I'm folding tables and rolling them into the closet and picking up chairs. Is that the best use of my time? Probably not. But I'm multitasking, so I don't know how many times we've talked. So we have a small building, we flip it, we have dinner and snacks every Wednesday night for our students. Many come, like I said, straight from sports, and teenagers always eat. We put up a little cafe where they can buy pop at a non-inflated price, so they can still, like the old days, get a soda for 50 cents. Like, it's amazing to them. They're like, wow, this isn't $3. Wow, that's attractional in itself. You can come get a soda for 50 cents. So we put up this little cafe where they can buy stuff, and we just buy in bulk at Costco or Sam's Club and then sell it to them. And we're not making any money on this at all. It's just replenishing the fund to buy more stuff. We bought games like Spike Ball, we have an Xbox, we do a ping pong table, we have board games on the table. We try and hit every aspect of students. Not all of them want to play Spike Ball. Not all of them want to play Xbox. So we try and hit. And I just get together with students and our youth pastor. What do you guys like to do? You gotta ask them. I could put everything at all the tables and buy it all, and then watch, like, Monopoly's not gonna get played. And so I'm not gonna spend my money on Monopoly. But I wouldn't know that unless I asked them. So we have our little student leadership team, and we just continually talk to them. What's new, what's cool, what are kids doing, what are kids, on all that. So we have lots of little games like that. We do random hangout nights where they can just come and have fun. And for us, that's just relationship building. We'd say, hey, come, we're gonna have a movie, popcorn, and that might be our Wednesday night. And I'm totally fine with a few nights a year, us just creating a hangout night. We're gonna play some games, we're gonna have fun. If it's a high stress week, like a finals week in school, I'm not putting the pressure on our students to come and learn more. I want to create a fun and safe environment for them to just let their guard down. And what I noticed through doing that is our students open up a little bit more to our youth leaders, and pretty soon there's great conversations that have taken place. So we have those random hangout nights. Now, two big shifts that we made. I don't expect my youth pastor to write a sermon every week. It takes, as a pastor, 8 to 10 hours to write a message, right? If you get really good at it, 6 hours maybe. But even then, like, that's a lot of content to create in 6 hours, to study, to see what the Word of God says, to pray about it. That's a lot into 6 straight hours of working. So I don't put my youth pastor the pressure on him every week to come up with sermons and come up with catchy series, what's the latest lingo and all that. We buy it all, and we recycle some of it throughout the year. Like next year, it's, we just have sermons for next year planned. Hey, we're just going to cover this series in May because May is a stressful time for kids. So we're just going to have this. So we buy it all. I want my youth pastor spending time with our kids, not writing sermons. And before you judge me on all of that, I've been there. I wrote all the sermons for years. I don't want him spending time doing that. I want him spending time with students. Download youthministry.com is a fantastic resource, and the best part about it is it's dirt cheap. You can get a sermon series with 3 messages in it for like $10. And it's still the gospel being preached. Still the Holy Spirit can work through that content, but it takes the pressure off of a youth pastor to sit and study, to come up with stuff, to do everything. I've watched my youth pastor stress. He has a whiteboard, and he's writing everything on in all these series, and I was like, that's amazing, and I want to use all of that. But we can also buy a lot of it online, and it's done for you. And it comes with outlines and sermons and transcripts and graphics and videos and all this stuff for like $10. That is cheap. I would rather have him preach through that, and it's still biblical teaching. It's still Holy Spirit, everything is still there. It just takes the pressure off creating content, and you can focus more on discipling our youth leaders. I want their health to be good. I don't want just them burning out and showing up every Wednesday. I want to make sure that they're discipled. So another great resource is Alpha for Youth. We do this once a year, several weeks long, Alpha, and it's a video-based series, and it pauses during the video, and then they have table discussions through this, and their youth leaders are facilitating everything. We actually adopted this style of model into our preaching recently, and so our youth pastor, he has been, instead of writing a 30-minute sermon, he'll write 10 minutes of something, and just ideas and questions, and then he empowers our youth leaders to lead the table discussion questions. So he presents an idea as he's walking through scripture, and then allows at the table the students to talk about it. And we adopted this philosophy not because we saw it work so well in Alpha Youth, but, I just have the hiccups right now. But probably all the coffee I drank before I come in here. But we adopted this model because I heard the statistic that you can only pay attention for 1 minute of every year you're alive. Like, that's just today's fast-paced society with TikTok and everything, and attention, like, for every 1 minute. So you got a 15-year-old sitting in your youth group, they're tapped out after 15 minutes, and probably closer to 10. They're not gonna listen to your 30-minute sermon without sitting there fidgeting and getting frustrated. So to help break that up, we do table discussions. Hey, here's an idea, talk for 7 minutes or so, and talk about scripture. What do you think the Bible is saying about this and Jesus' teaching? And then they'll talk about it for 5 minutes at their table. So now you're switching their attention, and then you're switching it back to you for a few more minutes, and then back to the table, and it's keeping students engaging longer in conversation than just you preaching to them for 30 minutes. and then they're sitting there tired from sports. They're full from all the food they ate. They're thinking homework they got to do when they get home at 8:30 after this. So we started just adopting a couple different philosophies. And Alpha's free, so that's a great reason we do it every year, and it covers a couple months of content, and students love it. I'm like, you guys saw this all last year. They're like, we did? Okay, you didn't even pay attention then. So that was some freedom that honestly a pastor gave me a while ago. He said, even in your congregation, they won't remember 90% of what you say. That's adults. They don't remember sermons. I tested this theory one time. Pastor Josh would probably get mad at me for it. But I tested this theory. I preached a message when we launched the church, and then I preached it again last year. No one remembered it. And I just talked through why we can trust the Bible. And I thought, none of you, I had some of our people that have been with us since before we launched the church. Pastor, that was a great message. I didn't realize that was the reason that was in the Bible. And I was like, oh, I told you that 4 years ago. Remember that? So, as a pastor, as a youth pastor, have some freedom in knowing they're not going to remember 90% of what you say. Now, and this is what one of my pastors told me one time. They will remember how you made them feel and how the Holy Spirit made them feel. So how are you making your youth students feel when they walk into the building? Are you running around like a chicken with your head cut off because you're trying to get stuff set up? You're panicking about the message. You didn't study long enough. And all these different things, and they're just seeing this person like their parents walking around distracted. Or are they seeing you fist bumps? Hey, saw your game the other day. You did a home run you hit. It was awesome. Just encouraging them through that. Same with your congregation. You're not remembering what you're saying. Are you running around on a Sunday morning? And I'm guilty of this even to today. Running around trying to make sure the coffee team's where they need to be, doing this over here. We need to empower our leaders better in the church to be relational with people in our church and our youth in our church. So take your pressure off of you for that. They're not going to remember what you say, but they're going to remember how you made them feel and how God ultimately makes them feel. And I'll say this lastly, create a culture of prayer. Create a culture of prayer. Pray for students both privately and publicly. You should be interceding for your students because I promise you, very few people, if anyone, are praying for those students. I believe I'm a product today. I didn't say till I was 21, but my grandma was a believer. I believe I'm a product of today because of her interceding for me all those years. She was an amazing woman, attended an incredible church with my grandpa, and they prayed for me all the time. And I believe I'm here today because of that. Saved by grace. You know what I'm trying to say. But pray for your youth, because I guarantee you no one is. No one is praying for them. So you need to be interceding for them on their behalf. And can I just say this too? Stay off the social media they're on. And I have changed my philosophy on this big time. Because it has gotten worse. Stay off the social media they are on. I used to think we got to promote our events on Snapchat and TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, and we got to make sure we're putting our stuff in front of them because the world's putting their stuff in front of them. So we should put our stuff in front of them. But again, what you do in moderation, they're going to do in excess. So if you're putting all of your stuff on social media, you are giving them permission to be on social media. You're just giving them permission to be there. And they're thinking, well, Pastor so-and-so is on, Instagram, so why shouldn't I be on Instagram? It must be okay to be on Instagram because you're a Christian. And is Instagram wrong? Not at all. It's the time of what they're doing, sitting there doing this 24 hours a day, killing brain cells, right? But that's a whole different message. We won't go there. But what you do in moderation, they're going to do in excess. So we have pulled back all our stuff off of social media, and we've gone old school, baby. We give invite cards to our students to give to their friends. We hang up posters in the school because we have permission now in the school to do so. So we had to get involved with the school to let them know we're not crazy in this weird church that, you know, people come to that aren't Catholic or Lutheran. And we've just gotten permission in the schools to do these kinds of things. So we do invite cards, we do posters, we advertise in the newspaper, we empower our students to invite their friends to Wednesday nights and stuff like that, or events that we host, and just go old school with it. You gotta be attractional, you gotta make disciples. Be attractional and make disciples. Plus, the thought of snapping students as an adult is just horrible. And I did it for a long time, even in Garrison. Like, as a campus pastor, yeah, I'm involved with their life. I'm here if they need me, they know where to find me. And then I realized they all know where I live. So it doesn't matter, because everybody knows everything in small towns. And so it's like, if they really need me, they can come to my front door. If they really need me, their parents have my phone number. Like, it's just this moment, they have my phone number. I don't care about those things, but I'm not going to put myself in a position where, oh, so-and-so is snapping. I thought about that as a parent. So-and-so is snapping my 14-year-old daughter. That's creepy. I'm not going to put myself in that shoes, and I'm not going to put anyone in our church in that position to have that very awkward conversation. So we just pulled all our stuff back of all social media and just went old school with it. Be attractional and make disciples. Do fun things and do stupid things. Permission, do fun and stupid things, because teenagers love that stuff. We still play random games on the stage of like, will it blend? And we'll mix all of spaghetti and meatballs in a blender and see which student can drink it the fastest. And all of them throw up. It's dumb, it's super cheap, but all the kids are laughing and we're making deposits into them so we can withdraw 10 minutes later when we're talking about Jesus. So it's weird, it's gross. We try and come up with some random things like that. It's just fun, because kids want to have fun, they want to be engaged. I mean, think of being a teenager. My youth pastor says it the best. He's like, Cory, one of the hardest things is going from youth ministry to kids ministry, and getting in the mindset of a teenager, and then being an adult, and then getting in the mindset of a kid, and then being an adult. And I'm like, that is a really hard transition you gotta make. And you gotta figure out some ways to do that. And he's just come up with some incredible ways to figure out how to think like a teenager. Like, if I was a teenager coming to church, and what would I wanna do? I wanna have fun. I wanna create a fun environment for them. And so we do stupid things like that. Once a year we rent a dunk tank, and just all the youth leaders get in it. We raise money for Speed the Light, and it's fun, and students, they end up getting in the dunk tank too, and it's cheap and it's a fun way. We do raise money. We have competitions for pies in the face and stuff like that, because it's just fun and cheap, and we're teaching them through giving in that aspect. But you have to build relationships with your youth in the community. Don't just do a Wednesday night event or a Friday night event and expect everyone to show up because it's the coolest and latest and greatest things. You have to go to them. An effective small town youth group doesn't just happen. It doesn't just happen. It takes close partnership with you, your youth leaders. Your church has to get behind this vision of teenagers and the next generation, and you have to be committed to being a part of their life. You have to be committed. And it's this aspect of, it's hard as a parent to be involved in every student's life. So that's why it takes empowering leaders that have more free time. One of my favorite people in our church, amazing youth leader. Her kids have all graduated. Her and her husband run a business in town. She will come up randomly and say, Pastor, she's in her 50s, Pastor, can I take your daughter out for lunch? Yeah. She has all the free time in the world. This lady, she will just take youth, girls in our kids ministry, and take them to lunch or take them to dinner, and just wants to spend time with them. And I went, I never thought of somebody that their kids are out of their house. I'm thinking, we gotta have young college kids that are cool and hip and hip, I just said hip, I ain't dating myself now. But it's this moment of like, there are incredible people that have kids that are out of the house, and they want to continue to spend time with kids in the church. And it's amazing. She'll just text my wife and I, can I come pick up your daughter for lunch, Dairy Queen, today? Yeah. And they have great conversation. She is a sweetheart. She is amazing. She's bragging on my daughter. I'm like, oh, did you take my kid out to lunch? Because I have a very different kid at home, but like, it's this moment of like, they care. They just want to care, and they want to bless this next generation. So find those people in your church. They might not be a youth leader because they can't do something every Wednesday night, but they might just want to adopt a youth in the church. They might want to adopt an area of like, hey, I will just commit the lady that her son and her whole family now come to church. She runs the concession stand at the baseball field. She just has adopted that as part of our church. I will run the concession stands. I will stock it with everything. I will schedule volunteers for it. She's like, let me just adopt that area of youth and run with it. And I'm like, is she a youth leader? No, not at all. But she's a youth leader. She's running that whole aspect, and now everybody sees her. They know she comes to Evangel. Our face is out there. And I'm like, this is an amazing, amazing outreach that she's doing. And it's not every Wednesday night. Youth ministry is happening 24/7 in our church and in our community because of people like this. And I'll end with this. A couple years ago at Ministers Enrichment, I was tired and exhausted from having a baby, and not having a baby, but we had a baby. But it was this moment where I wasn't really listening to the sermon, I wasn't listening to the message. And I caught the last end of it, and the speaker said, get a friend. He said, get a friend. That's a random thing to say at the end of a sermon. And it caught my attention, and so I started paying attention at that moment. And it was, instead of trying to get a mentor and always growing, he said, get a friend. Someone you can vent to, someone you can talk to, that's not your spouse and not your lead pastor. Get a friend. I mentioned earlier, Dustin and I talk every Thursday. Out of that 2 years ago, I just text Dustin and said, hey, will you be my friend? And we talk every Thursday now for about half hour to an hour. And it's anywhere from you traveling to baseball games to things like we just need to talk about and process. And I can't process with other people, but I trust Dustin with my life. And so we can talk about very personal things. I hate the word accountability partner. I get it. I do get it. But I need a friend more than need an accountability partner. I need someone I can trust that's going to not try to fix all my problems. I say, Cory, let me just pray with you. And sometimes we have to do funny conversations. Like, dude, did you see what's happening in the news with Mark Driscoll right now and John Lindell and the crazy church conference stuff? And we're chatting about it. What do you think? What do you think? Like, I need just someone to talk to, right? And I talk to my wife about everything. But there's just times I want a friend in ministry that is walking the same road I'm walking, and we can just pray for each other. And so when I say get a friend for ministry, get someone that's in the same boat as you, same size church, same size youth ministry. Get a friend in that aspect. And it's hard because I'm a campus pastor, you're a youth pastor, but I was a youth pastor, but you basically serve as a campus pastor. Pastor Sheldon is just awesome, and he's like, let me get up and preach and empower all of you in the church. And so you do everything up there. But it's this moment of like, we just are in this friend aspect, we can talk to each other about anything. And I trust him. I can share anything with him. Text him at any time of the night. Text you late at night before. You text me. I'm praying for you. All these things. So not a mentor. Someone you can bounce ideas off of. Someone that's in the same game as you that can be a friend. And remember, they're not going to show up to your thing unless you show up to their thing. Pastor Twyla used to say, can I still say Pastor Twyla? Pastor Twyla, our former DYD, used to say, permission on the field is permission at the altar. And I tweaked one word in that. Presence on the field is permission at the altar. Presence on the field in their life, in their activities, the things they're doing, gives you permission at the altar. You have to make deposits to make withdrawals. 2 books you should go home and read if you're a reader. Thriving Youth Ministry in Smaller Churches, and then Thriving Youth Groups. Thriving Youth Ministry in Smaller Churches, and Thriving Youth Groups. No, Thriving Youth Groups is Jeannie Mayo, and I don't remember the author for the other one, but they're in like a series of books about youth ministry, and those two are ones that really change the way I do things. Same series, Thriving. Thriving youth ministry in small churches and thriving youth groups. I had Q&A on here, but we have 2 minutes. I want to respect everyone's time. Just because we say we're Pentecostal doesn't mean we have to go an hour after church. Cool. If you do have questions, I have some cards. I'll give everybody with my email address on it. And you can email me, we can chat on the phone, whatever it might be. So I don't have all the answers, but I promise to find them. I said that, so now I can hold to it. You bet. Thanks for being here.